Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Three Losers in a Church podcast, episode 22, and this is part 3 of our 3-part series where we reflect on a retreat reflections, I suppose you could call it.
Or recap, depending on translation.
Recap, thank you. I forgot the main word in the title. Speaking of title, I don't know what this one's called, but it's in which Sam will speak about relationships.
Indeed. Not romantic relationships. Not actually just normal relationships. So the reason why I want to talk about it, one was because I think one of you guys brought it up, but two, I realized throughout the past 3 episodes we've been talking about how we see God in regards to this retreat. So Chris talked about how he saw God through the return to simplicity, or going back to the basics. And then your boy Tyler talked about seeing God through worship. So I think fitting. English is hard. It's
Fittingly?
my second. I don't think that's a word. That's a word. It's not. No.
Fittingly?
I think that's a word.
Really?
I think so.
We could talk about that all day. But I think for me, the way I see God is definitely through interactions and through relationships. With retreat, there was a lot of that. I don't remember much of like the interactions during free time because that was just a lot of like gooning around. But I think what stood out to me was the discussion groups. So multiple times throughout this weekend, I lost my questions, Chris. So this is also just me confessing my sins to you right now.
I had extra copies.
I know, and you gave me another one, and I still lost it. Turned out it was in my other jacket, and I just forgot it.
We got home and Sam was like, "Oh, there's my discussion questions." So I confessed my sins of the ego behind worship. Sam confessed his sins of losing the questions for the
Chris, what sin do you have to?
Well, we're all open now, Chris. You might as well.
Right. I'll write a list.
But yeah, I think in those moments where we had to meet with the kids and everything, I just straight up told them, I don't have questions. So let's talk about your reactions and kind of your life. And I think to relate to previous episodes too, like this is a very interesting group of kids because a lot of them, they've grown up in this area. And they've also grown up in the church to some degree, but to see where their faith is, to see like how it relates to them, it's not a priority for a lot of them. And I think that's very much okay. But it's a matter of how does one navigate that conversation with them. So I don't know. I just kind of want to open up the floor for you guys too to chime in because I saw a lot of interactions with you guys and conversations too. But like, what were some ways that you saw God through the interactions you had with the students this semester, this retreat? So,
Oh man,
I like reflecting on relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it there. We're just seeing the way they were relating to each other and treating each other was huge. Because usually there's like a high tension point during retreat where people are like maybe bored or frustrated or tired or like they've just been around each other too long and they start like butting heads. And I just like didn't really see that, which is amazing. Granted, it wasn't like a week-long thing like summer camp, but I had to yell at everyone in a pool. But
That was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time. But like, I don't know. It seemed like genuine relationship was happening, even if it's not like everyone's best friends now.
Yeah, there's a moment that I shared. We had like a small reflection time when we were up there, and all of us old people were sitting at one table, and then there was like the rest of them, and there's 2 years between most of us, so I'm not that old, but like they're all sitting at one table and like what seemed to be like having one conversation and we're not murdering each other. In retrospect, we were at a different table, so who knows what was actually happening over there. But from my vantage point, I was like, wow, they're really getting along. And then my head was like, no, someone's probably about to die. Something's going to go wrong. But I think there was like a powerful moment there, whether or not that happened coincidentally or on purpose. The world may never know. But it's from the Tootsie Roll lollipop commercial.
Anywho.
But that was probably one highlight of relationships.
They're called Tootsie Pops.
Right? I forgot. It's the owl. He's like, how many licks to take to get to the
No. I caught your drift. I'm just like,
it's not worth the conversation.
No, it's not.
we all sighed at the exact same time and
We need
stopped
to
at the
stop
exact
getting-
same time.
we need to stop
Anyways,
getting
so
with each other.
there was a moment at retreat, that moment when they all were at that table, and it was pretty cool. So I think taking myself out of the situation, because as though like I spent a lot of time not really mentoring to students. I didn't lead a small group. I spent that time like reading and kind of reflecting on that. But it was cool because I would kind of I was like the cool uncle who kind of showed up, and played games. Like I was like, oh, carbon ball, yeah. And, like, ran over. It's like that was kind of much more like personal relationships, opposed to like, oh, I have some teaching to share with you. It was like, I'm gonna beat you at pool. So I like that was it was kind of like it was a different relationship than I anticipated, but it was pretty cool. Yeah.
I liked what you said about like you didn't have much to share, like I guess like quote unquote wisdom wise. Not saying that you're not a wise guy.
No, yeah.
You are a wise guy.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I'm also just I realized this past retreat was a retreat that I didn't have an opportunity to reflect on because I went straight from work into retreat, out of retreat, died, and then went back to work the next day. So right now,
You were resuscitated and then went back to work.
the worst situation.
The American dream.
It's the American dream.
That's also a lie. What did I do? There was a holiday the day
It
after.
was. You didn't do anything that day.
I didn't do
yeah.
anything that
Why are
day.
you lying?
Why you always lie?
That's what I had to do.
Yeah. I got to die for 2 days and then I went back to work. But one thing I realized this past retreat, and I'm just reflecting on the go because this is also, I'm just like, oh, I didn't think much about it. This was one of the first retreats where I really realized that the idea of listening is so crucial. Instead of preaching to the kids, because beyond like discussion groups, I just asked questions and I just sat there and just facilitated. Like it's been a while since I led a discussion group on my own, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. Just kind of opening it up and not really, and just kind of seeing where the conversation went. Like I had one student talking about absurdism, and then Chris just farted.
This podcast is now titled 3 Children in Church.
Oh, I hope that don't smell. Literally so close to your. Oh man. As I said earlier, I see God a lot in the interactions with people, and to hear how you guys are talking about how these kids kind of like matured over time. I would honestly, it was a lot of like seeing where they've come, right? Seeing the interactions with the upperclassmen and then like our little youngins, I was like, wow, they're playing, but they're not like out to get them. It was more like, hey, like we'll hang out, and they kind of understood like, oh, the differences in age and experiences, which I really appreciated. And just to see how God can work on people in different ways. Like most of the kids there, I knew them like 6 years ago, which is mind-boggling to me. And just to see like where they've gone and how they've progressed as individuals. Like they have their scars, they have their pains. But to see that they're still here and that they're still growing, it brought me joy, but also a little bit of sadness because I realized, wow, like we talked about like simplicity earlier. I feel like to see them get jaded by the world and also scarred by the world, I was like, dang, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
There was one student during our reflective circle who talked about how much he liked Hume because it was kind of constant. Like the area itself was constant. The staff may change, but like every time they return, it's like kind of like a nostalgia trip or a return, or like a breath of fresh air. So
Yeah.
just to see them like progressing, I'm like, that's very sweet. Which I really appreciated.
Yeah. I was the one in high school who always liked the book The Catcher in the Rye.
Never read it.
Really? I liked it. It was, I don't know. That's like an unpopular opinion for multiple reasons. Because like some people say it's not controversial, even though they make it out to be, and then other people just say it's a really bad book. But anyway, the whole like it's like he wants to protect his sister from losing her innocence, you know, and like the whole book is like loss of innocence and all this, and it's like you kind of see that in real time when you've been doing what you've been doing for as long as you have, because you're like the longest serving hub leader.
Which is absurd to say.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like you've literally watched them, in a sense, lose their innocence. That's what happens as we age, which is horrifying. But
Yeah.
Sam saw a little happy young Tyler Page, freshman year.
Wiggles.
Wiggles, good old Wiggles.
Now you're just.
Now I'm old jaded Tyler Page. I don't have a nickname anymore.
Or a buzz cut.
Or a buzz cut. That's what. Yeah, the return of the buzz cut should happen someday.
I used to have a buzz cut too.
We should all just get buzz cuts.
Buzz cut podcast.
Yeah.
3 buzz cuts in a church.
That's
Yeah, nope. That's
a little
dicey.
racy.
Yeah, super dicey. Yeah, but I think another aspect that I also, because I was the whole time I was filming as well, so I'm literally behind a camera watching things real time. But I think something that I also saw that I really appreciate was just seeing how much the staff had grown over time as well. Whether it be worship leaders, whether it be you, Mr. Christopher. I guess this is just me appreciating the path and the journey that we've all come on. But this was the first hub retreat without Pastor Josh. This was the first, probably the tiniest hub retreat we've had in a while.
Yeah.
This is, we were all on one floor. It was just small.
Right.
But I think despite that, I mean, some would argue like this is a lull right now in like the ministry. It's a low. But regardless, like to see how God's like worked in all these different people, I was just like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yo, that's crazy. To see you, Chris, get uncomfortable, boy. But like to see you just speaking. At some point, I think I shared this with you, but like I was hit with such a pain of like the pain of just like joy, but also just nostalgia because there was a shot I took last year of the camera filming Josh when I was recording his sermons. That turned out to be a bad idea because none of those things properly recorded. But I took the similar shot because, habit. But instead of, as I focused in on the camera that was recording your message, instead of Josh, it was you. And I was like, holy crap. Like 1 year ago, it was Pastor Josh. Now here you are following or just going on your own path to become a youth pastor. I was like, that just hits me. It hits so different. It's the first year without Thomas Franklin on worship team. Yeah. So to see even you, Tyler, even though you led a worship retreat a couple months before, like to see you back on stage. But the word simplicity, I think, really sums up this retreat because this was also the first hub retreat I was at that didn't have a crazy stage setup.
Yeah, super
it was
low key.
Right.
So bare minimum.
Yeah, I looked up. So I know we're not in the video right now, so the podcast listeners don't care what I'm saying. But behind Chris and Sam, there's a photo in my room of hub retreat 3 years ago, and Chris is kind of in the background, maybe even more. I don't remember. I think I might be maybe a junior in that photo.
That might be last year.
That's not last year.
That was 2 years ago.
I think it's 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And so actually 3 years ago because I'm playing guitar. And so I was looking at that photo and I look in the background and there's these trees and they're lit up with these LEDs and we have all this wireless equipment and there's multiple instruments and all those other things. And I was like, wow, dang. First of all, I was like, I somehow look the exact same.
Yeah.
But I'm literally wearing the same shirt.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Same guitar, right? I think my guitar is a good metaphor for my life. It has way less scratches and dents on it. And true, the same thing's probably true about my personality. I definitely had way less scratches and dents on it. But I don't know, there's moments of oh, wow. And I said this at the beginning of the retreat where I was like, this place is special, right? I was like, there's something about this place. That chapel will always have a special place in my heart. Tears have been shed, strings have been broken, voices have been cracked, bases have almost been destroyed accidentally, concussions have been worsened, a lot of good stories and bad stories in that room. But it felt different. And there was this thing we kept saying throughout the weekend of but this is different. And you were kind of getting at that point, but I just wanted to kind of jump in there.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. I hate the idea of like speaking of the glory days, right?
Yeah, and we talked about this last week.
Oh, that was last
Podcast.
Oh, last podcast. Okay, that was last week. But I think this is a prime example of like, sure in the past we had more numbers. Sure in the past our production like set thing literally was cooler, but this also had special moments. This also had people sharing. People had listening. Like, what I really enjoyed was that we had testimony sharing this time around, and to open up with just people sharing about where they at. It was a wide range of testimonies from like, being in the church for so long to like, their struggles and like where we are. I just thought to myself, it only proves to you that like God is working in all circumstances, regardless of what may seem like worldly success. So to see people interacting with such like excitement, like those what was it? You mentioned earlier in one episode we were talking about fire beats, like how people were like relaxing. That was like probably one of the first times where I got to just sit down and just listen to kids sharing things with me.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't need to tell them anything like crazy or provocative. I didn't need to like break their world with some crazy like saying or like philosophy. It was just me just being present and listening to what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, which is enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, side comment on that fire beats thing. It was just like, as odd as that seems, like, I'm sure the podcast listeners, but kind of to me, I was walking and I was like, what the heck's going on here? But it's like that is something they've poured their life into and something they've poured a lot of effort into. And the students are like, I can't wait to show this.
Yeah.
And so like that shows, like they were showing it to a room full of people, right? And I mean, vulnerability is there. Maybe it's not like, some crazy Jesus moment or something, but that like maybe externally that's what that is.
Yeah.
But like, who knows, right? So.
It was just a matter of us I think going back to when you talked about worship, I want to say this as well, but we may want to put on a show. We may want to put on like the best thing or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, like the simple fact is that a retreat is a place where we provide an area for people to be with God, to be away from society, to be away from what's cluttering their life at that moment. It's a quick breath of fresh air before they go back diving into the water again. And that's what a lot of people are saying. Like the one question I left off with at the retreat was actually stolen from your Hume experience. Was just like, actually, I don't know if it was stolen. I might modify, but the question I asked them was like, what's something that you're gonna miss when you leave retreat? Followed up by what's something that you're looking forward to when you go back home.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were talking about like the regular routine of life. I mentioned this 2 episodes ago, but they don't want to. They're afraid to go back, but they also know that it's gonna be okay. One student said like he wanted to do something that, in my opinion, was like very brave of him. He wanted to talk to his parents about something. I was like, oh my, like, I hope I hope for the best for you. And I think what I saw for me, like I walked by and I saw you, Chris, just listening to the student as he shared his heart out when he shared about his like fears and struggles about that. I was like, that's beautiful. We as leaders, we as individuals, we as older Christ followers, we don't need to preach and like, tell them what to do. Sometimes we just gotta listen.
Yeah.
Right. And then your faith story, I'm so glad you shared it. You shared it on the podcast too, but like, talking to your father about all those things.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was so relevant to somebody who needs to hear that, so. I
didn't register that. So I was just like, huh. Which is, goes to show you, like, you don't, like, one, being in a space where you have the opportunity to be present with God, and 2, as leaders, as individuals who are participating in this, let yourself be open to the idea that God can use the words that you say. God can use your experiences and you just listening to also open another door for someone else.
Yeah.
So. There's like a moment, and like Chris briefly touched on this at retreat, but it was like your message tied in perfectly with his faith story. We decided to play Who You Say I Am out of the blue. We weren't planning on playing that song. Totally switched. And like the song went great with Sam's faith story and then phenomenally with your teaching. And it was like super bizarre.
Right.
And I was like, this is really weird. like none of this should have happened. What just happened? And like, I don't know. And that plays into like making a space. And like, that just goes to show all of our efforts separately somehow magically came together. I didn't tell you I was going to switch songs.
I had no. Your only question for me was like, do you want to share before worship or
Right.
after? And I was like, I guess I'll go before.
I didn't think about it. I just switched songs because I didn't like one.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to play that right now. I'm going to put this one in. And then, Chris, you had your message planned already.
Mm.
And like, you probably adapted it a little, but like, it's just like, it was weird. I was sitting there and I was like, these kind of go together a little too well. I don't like this.
Glory to
Kids
God.
are like, how did they plan this?
It seemed like we were grand master
Right.
planners when it was an accident. I don't know.
We just stumbled into it.
As is our life.
As
We
is
just-
our
Yeah.
life, yeah.
we stumble through and
We
somehow
stumble through.
we make it seem like we're so wise.
Right. That's all that being an adult is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that whole idea of space. I think to kind of wrap this all up is bringing you back to basics in a way is making a space, observing that Sabbath in space. Worship in an empty room, right? Is kind of how I processed that space, right? That whole idea of I'm just an avenue for worship, right? As worship leader. And then this whole idea of relationships, right? How there's this special place called Hume. Not really special, but like the memories associated with it make it special and make it this space for these conversations to happen, for God to do weird set list things that I was not expecting. And like that happens everywhere. But I think because we're back to those basics, because we were paying attention to those things, we saw them much more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. Good job, guys. Thank you so much. Thank me so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank Tyler specifically.
But yeah, so I think somehow we almost all said the same thing, but like our own little different flavor.
Yeah. That's all we do all the time anyway.
That's right. Yeah, that's our life. We all, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I like this.
Yeah.
Right.
I somehow get really distracted and convoluted about something. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed our small little recap of retreat. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
It was a good retreat. All in all, super good. It was really good. Yeah.
God is good.
God is freaking good.
All the time.
All the time.
God is good.
Be sure to check us out on
Thank you.
on YouTube, on Apple Music, on the podcast app, not on Spotify. You can get dabbed on Spotify.
Because it hates me.
Yeah.
Though Spotify, please accept us. I use that platform the most.
Be sure to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Hit that little notification bell for that little ting, for that little noise when we upload our new episodes. And thanks for joining us with episode 22. We out.
We out.
Bye-bye.